If someone had told me a single sentence could change my entire life, I would have laughed. But that was before she spoke. My name is Grace, and I'm 32 years old. For years, I thought I knew what family meant. Love, loyalty, and trust. I married Mark because I believed in all of that. I believed in him. I believed in us. But nothing could have prepared me for the day my world cracked open, all because of 7 little words. It happened when my in-laws left for their dream vacation in Hawaii, leaving me behind to care for Sophie, my sister-in-law who, until that moment, had never spoken a word. We all thought she was silent, fragile, broken. But in a matter of seconds, Sophie shattered every illusion I had ever held, and with it, she handed me the truth I had been too blind to see. This is the story of how one quiet girl helped me find my voice and my freedom. I met Mark when I was 27 at a friend's birthday party in Charlotte. He was charming, funny, and had that polished confidence that drew people in. I was working as a junior designer for a small fashion brand at the time, barely making rent, but proud of every step I'd fought to take on my own. Mark was different from anyone I'd dated. He was stable, successful, and, in the beginning, thoughtful in a way that made me believe I'd finally found someone who valued me. We fell in love fast, too fast maybe. 6 months later, he proposed on a quiet beach during sunset, and despite a tiny voice in my gut telling me to slow down, I said yes. I wanted so badly to build a home, to be part of something solid. Mark's family, the Crawfords, seemed picture-perfect from the outside. His mother, Evelyn, all grace and poise. His sister, Sophie, quiet but sweet. And his father, always working but generous. After we married, Mark suggested I quit my job and focus on starting a family. He said I deserved a break, and honestly, part of me wanted that too. So I gave up my career and settled into the role of a full-time wife. At first, it felt almost like a fairy tale. Lazy mornings, weekend trips, and the kind of stability I thought I'd always wanted. But the cracks started to show faster than I expected. Evelyn had a way of making me feel small with just a glance. Every visit to their pristine house felt like a test I couldn't pass. She'd comment on my cooking, the way I folded towels, even the shoes I wore. "You're representing the Crawfords now," she'd say pointedly, as if I were some outsider who'd stumbled in uninvited. Mark at first would laugh it off. "That's just my mom," he'd say with a shrug, like it was nothing. But soon I noticed how he began to change too. The affection that once felt effortless became something I had to chase. Our dinners grew quieter, our conversations shorter. He worked late more often, and when he was home, his eyes were usually glued to his phone. Still, I tried. I cleaned, cooked, smiled through the tension, told myself this was just a phase. And through it all, there was Sophie, Mark's younger sister, who had been diagnosed with severe nerve damage after a childhood illness. She couldn't speak or walk, and yet there was a gentleness about her that drew me in. While Evelyn bossed me around and Mark drifted further away, Sophie was the only one who made me feel seen. I started spending more time with her. She'd sit by the window, sketching little pictures with surprising skill. We developed a silent understanding. I'd bring her tea. She'd offer me a shy smile. I couldn't explain it, but with Sophie, I felt like I didn't have to pretend. If only I had known how much she was pretending, too. Looking back now, I realized the signs had been there all along. Mark's distant stares, his clipped responses, the way his phone was always flipped over on the table. But at the time, I wanted so badly to believe everything was fine that I ignored the nagging ache in my chest. One evening, as I was folding laundry in our small apartment, Mark came home later than usual. His tie was loose, his eyes tired, and before I could even ask, he mumbled something about back-to-back meetings. I brought him a plate of dinner, but he barely touched it. Instead, he sat there scrolling through his phone, so checked out that it felt like I was dining alone. Sophie became my refuge. I visited her almost every other day, finding quiet comfort in her presence. I'd sit beside her while she sketched, and we'd share peaceful silences that felt more genuine than any words Mark had spoken to me in months. Over time, I noticed Sophie's drawings shifted, from simple flowers and houses to more emotional, almost haunting pieces. One day, She handed me a sketch of a woman standing alone at the edge of a cliff, wind whipping through her hair. There was something eerily familiar about it, something that made my stomach twist. I glanced at Sophie, searching her eyes for answers, but she just gave me a soft smile and pointed at her heart. I didn't know what to make of it at the time. Then came the trip to Hawaii. It was a rainy Saturday morning when Mark sat me down in the kitchen. He looked uncomfortable, like he was rehearsing bad news. "My parents and I are going to Hawaii next week," he said, avoiding my gaze. "Oh," I replied, a bit stunned. "And what about me?" He hesitated. "We thought it'd be best if you stayed here to look after Sophie. Traveling's too hard for her, and honestly, Mom thinks you're the best person for the job." I felt a cold wave of disappointment wash over me. Hawaii was a place we'd once dreamed of visiting together. Now, they were going without me, and I was being left behind, once again, to play caretaker. I wanted to protest, to ask why I hadn't been part of the conversation. But before I could find the words, the doorbell rang. Evelyn walked in, her smile tight and eyes sharp. "Mark explained everything, didn't he?" she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We're counting on you." I forced a polite smile, my hands clenched under the table. "Of course. I'll take good care of Sophie." Evelyn nodded, satisfied, and turned to leave. As soon as the door shut behind them, Mark gave me a brief, almost guilty look. "Thanks, Grace. I owe you." And just like that, he was gone. Left alone in the quiet apartment, I stared at the empty hallway, a sinking feeling settling deep in my gut. Something wasn't right. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it coming, like a storm gathering just out of sight. A few days later, I moved into Mark's parents' house to stay with Sophie. When I arrived, she was waiting by the window, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. I sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Looks like it's just us now," I signed with a small smile. Sophie's expression darkened slightly. She signed back, "They left you again." The words hit me harder than I expected. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. "Yes," I signed back. "They left." But then Sophie did something that made my heart race. She signed again, her movements deliberate and clear. "We have our own plans. They'll be surprised." I stared at her, stunned. And for the first time, I realized that Sophie had been holding on to a secret far bigger than I ever imagined. The next morning felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, like the house itself was holding its breath. I brought Sophie her usual cup of tea and found her sitting by the window, gazing out at the garden. I knocked gently and stepped inside. "Good morning," I said softly. But instead of her usual nod or smile, Sophie did something that made my world tilt on its axis. She stood up. I froze, the cup trembling in my hand. "Sophie, what are you doing?" I whispered, my heart thudding wildly. She stepped forward, her movements smooth and steady, and looked me straight in the eye. Then, for the first time since I'd known her, Sophie spoke, her voice soft but unwavering. "Grace, sit down. There's something you need to know." I nearly dropped the cup. You can talk? You can walk?" I stammered, struggling to process what I was seeing. Sophie nodded calmly. "I never lost the ability. It was all an act, a shield I had to maintain to protect myself from Evelyn." My mind raced. Memories flashed. Every time I'd pushed her wheelchair, every word I'd signed, every look of quiet sadness I thought I understood. It had all been a lie? "Why?" I finally managed to ask, my voice cracking. Sophie sat down across from me, her gaze steady. "Because I'm not who they say I am. Evelyn isn't my real mother. My father was married before, and I'm his daughter from that marriage. After he died, Evelyn took control of everything. She saw me as nothing more than a burden, a mistake she had to tolerate. When I was 10, I got sick. Evelyn delayed taking me to the hospital, hoping the illness would do her dirty work. I survived. But when the neighbors started asking questions, she told everyone I had brain damage. I realized then that the less of a threat I appeared, the more freedom I had. I sat there stunned, my thoughts colliding like a train wreck. But why tell me this now? Sophie's eyes gleamed with something I hadn't seen before. Determination. Because it's time to stop hiding. I've been waiting for the right moment, and this is it. Evelyn and Mark think they've won, leaving you behind like a discarded toy. But they don't realize they just gave us the upper hand. She stood and walked to the closet, pulling out a small suitcase and a folder. I've been planning this for years, she said, opening the folder to reveal documents, photographs, and, shockingly, recordings. Every time Evelyn and Mark plotted something behind your back, I documented it. I knew one day it would be useful. My head spun. You knew all along what they were doing? Sophie nodded. I saw how they treated you, Grace. I saw the coldness, the manipulation. And I knew you were better than all of it. That's why I'm trusting you now. She pulled out 2 plane tickets. We're going to Hawaii. I blinked, completely thrown. What? Mark and Evelyn think they've escaped, but we're going to show them that their little paradise isn't as safe as they think. We'll confront them, with proof, and make sure they can never hurt you again. I stared at her, my pulse racing. Part of me was terrified, but another part, the part that had been quietly breaking all these months, felt something else. Relief. A spark of hope. I looked at Sophie, her strength radiating through every word and action, and I realized she wasn't just helping me, she was setting both of us free. Are you sure about this? I asked quietly. Sophie's lips curved into a small, confident smile. I've never been more sure of anything. I took a deep breath and nodded. Then let's do it. And just like that, the pieces of my broken world started to shift, not toward destruction, but toward something stronger, something new. We were no longer victims of their games. We were about to become the authors of our own ending. The plane touched down in Honolulu just after sunrise, bathing everything in soft gold. I sat beside Sophie, still stunned by how much my life had changed in just a few days. Less than a week ago, I'd been a silent bystander in my own marriage. Now I was about to face my husband and mother-in-law head-on, armed with the truth. Sophie was calm, her sunglasses on, looking every bit the confident woman she was always meant to be. She squeezed my hand as we left the airport. Remember, she whispered, this isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your power. We checked into a beachfront resort. A different building, but the same property where Mark and Evelyn were staying. Sophie had planned every detail down to the minute. That evening, we got dressed for dinner. Sophie in a sleek emerald blouse, her hair pulled back in a chic ponytail, and me in a navy dress that made me feel stronger just wearing it. At 7 p.m., we slipped quietly into the poolside restaurant. The place was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses, but my eyes locked instantly onto Mark and Evelyn, sitting at a candlelit table, with another woman. My heart clenched. The woman was younger, polished, leaning in close to Mark with a hand resting on his arm. Evelyn looked thrilled, raising her wineglass like she didn't have a care in the world. Sophie tugged me back behind a row of potted palms. That's her, she whispered. The one he's been seeing. I recognized her from the photos on Evelyn's phone. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking slightly. What's the plan? Sophie gave me a cool smile and handed me an earpiece. I planted a small recorder under their table earlier. Let's see what they've been saying. I slid the earpiece in. At first, just clinking glasses and background noise. Then Evelyn's sharp voice cut through. She's useless, Mark. You made the right call. Once you divorce her, we can finally move on without dead weight. Mark's voice followed, low and smug. Yeah. My lawyer says if we frame it right, I won't have to pay her anything. Emotional neglect, or something like that. My stomach turned. I yanked the earpiece out and met Sophie's gaze. No more hiding. We stepped out of the shadows, heels clicking on the polished wood deck. Mark looked up first. His eyes widened in horror, his fork clattering onto his plate. Evelyn froze mid-sip, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. Good evening, I said, my voice clear and steady. I hope you're enjoying your little celebration. Grace, Whoa, what are you doing here? Mark stammered, standing up so fast his chair nearly toppled. Before I could answer, Sophie stepped forward. She looked straight at Evelyn and smiled coldly. Hi, Mom. Evelyn's face drained of color. You're walking? Sophie nodded slowly. I've been walking for years, but you preferred me silent and weak, remember? So I let you believe it. The woman sitting next to Mark looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. She quietly scooted her chair back, eyes darting around. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording. Mark's and Evelyn's voices rang out loud and clear over the quiet restaurant noise. Every word, every cruel intention, laid bare for everyone nearby to hear. Mark lunged forward, hissing, "Turn that off! You're making a scene!" I held his gaze, my voice ice cold. You made this scene, Mark. I'm just giving it a spotlight. Other diners began to stare, whispering behind their menus. Evelyn's hands trembled as she set her glass down. Grace, we can explain. No need. I cut in sharply. I have all I need, and my lawyer will too. Mark's face twisted with anger and panic. You think this is going to fix anything? You're ruining everything. I smiled softly. No, Mark. I'm saving myself. Big difference. Sophie stepped up beside me. And if you think we're done here, she added coolly, think again. Mark's mistress grabbed her purse and practically ran out of the restaurant, leaving him standing there, fists clenched, humiliated. Security approached, politely, but firmly asking Mark and Evelyn to leave after disturbing the peace. I watched them go, their once proud figures shrinking as they disappeared into the night. Sophie and I sat down at a quiet corner table, breathing in the salty air, the tension finally melting away. She raised her glass of sparkling water. To freedom, she said, her eyes shining. I clinked my glass against hers, a slow smile spreading across my face, to finally being seen and heard. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. The days after our confrontation in Hawaii felt like waking up from a long, twisted dream. I returned home stronger, no longer haunted by the endless loop of guilt and self-doubt that had weighed me down for so long. The old Grace, the woman who once bent over backward to please everyone, was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had learned the hard way that silence and patience are not the same as strength. The legal battle moved faster than I expected. With Sophie's help and the mountain of evidence she had gathered, my lawyer built an airtight case. Mark tried to fight it at first, but the more he pushed, the more tangled he became in his own lies. In the end, the court ruled in my favor, granting me a fair share of the marital assets, spousal support, and even a formal apology, though no words could ever truly make up for what I'd endured. But more important than any settlement was the peace I found within myself. I moved into a small apartment downtown. Nothing extravagant, but it was mine, every inch a symbol of freedom and resilience. I found work as a freelance consultant, choosing projects that aligned with my values and refusing to let anyone belittle or undermine me again. For the first time in years, I woke up each morning excited about my own future, no longer shackled by someone else's expectations. Sophie and I grew even closer after everything. She finally enrolled in the graphic design program she'd always dreamed of, and her talent blossomed in ways I'd always known it would. We often met for coffee or long walks in the park, and though we were no longer technically family, she remained my sister in every way that mattered. One afternoon, as we sat on a bench watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sophie turned to me and said something that stuck with me ever since. You know, Grace, sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones no one else can see, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth it. I nodded, squeezing her hand. And sometimes, I added, the quietest voices are the ones that change everything. Months passed, and life settled into a peaceful rhythm. But I didn't forget what I'd learned. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, offering workshops on financial independence and emotional resilience. It wasn't long before a few of us co-founded a small nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting women escaping toxic relationships. Helping others find their strength became my new purpose, a mission born from the ashes of my own pain. Then, one chilly autumn morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mark and Evelyn standing there, both looking far from the polished, powerful figures I remembered. Mark's eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped. Evelyn's face was lined with something I'd never seen before: regret. "Grace," Mark began, his voice cracking. We need your help." I said nothing, simply standing in the doorway, letting the silence stretch between us. Finally, Evelyn spoke, her tone soft, almost pleading. "We were wrong. About everything. We've lost. Everything." I took a deep breath and shook my head gently. "I'm sorry for your pain," I said calmly, "but I won't lose myself again by trying to save people who once broke me." Their shoulders sagged, and after a long, heavy pause, they turned and walked away. I closed the door behind them, my heart steady. I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter. I was simply done. I stepped out onto my balcony, breathing in the crisp fall air. The city buzzed softly below me, alive with possibility. I hugged the knitted pillow Sophie had made for me, a small but powerful reminder of everything we'd overcome. Not every story has a happy ending, but sometimes the best endings are the ones where you find yourself. And for me, this wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of a life I had finally chosen for myself.